Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Well, good morning, everybody, and happy game day. I'm Gary Harris, and you're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff. Let's go. As always, we begin with our Bama headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama headlines.
Game 1 at the freshly renovated Bryant-Denny Stadium today, this afternoon against Texas A&M. Throughout the show, we'll show off some of the new and improved aspects of the stadium following the off-season renovation project. The estimated cost of the construction project, $107 million. You can get a lot for that, and you should. It appears to be a good investment. Alabama and Texas A&M, a top 25 showdown for the third consecutive season, according to the Associated Press and the coaches poll. The Tide is number 2, while A&M checks in at number 13. We've got a stacked show, including a look inside one of the legends that connects these two football programs. You've heard of Junction, right? Coach Bryant, the Junction boys, plus interviews with Crimson Tide women's golf coach Mick Potter, Dr. Richard Friend, the dean of the university's College of Community Health, and Texas A&M play-by-play man Andrew Monaco will join us for our Behind Enemy Lines segment. Well, one game into the season, which weapon stood out in last week's win over Missouri? Mac Jones was really good, 18 of 24 for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both of those TDs went to electric receiver Jalen Waddle. The defense had some bright moments. Dylan Moses, first game back from a knee injury, and he did not waste any time. Najee Harris was responsible for 3 touchdowns and had 17 carries for 98 yards. But it's time now to move on. Alabama, as I said, plays a top 25 opponent for the first time this season in Texas A&M. Practice this week, defensive linemen. Let's show you how big and quick these guys are. Look at them pick up those feet. All those guys weighing around 300 pounds, but they can pick them up and put them down. It is amazing. Quarterbacks, Mac Jones and Bryce Young, getting their work in. Of course, Mac, the established starter. Bryce, the true freshman backup. Also, Paul Tyson in the mix. Brian Robinson, the senior from Hillcrest High School in Tuscaloosa. He is the running back behind Najee, and the true freshman, Trey Sanders, working to improve. He had a kind of a not the best start against Missouri. Nick Saban, talking with reporters earlier this week on Zoom, says Alabama needs to be ready for a 60-minute game.
Yeah, well, I think the players are working really hard, this week to take advantage of some of the lessons that we learned in the first game, try to get prepared for, a very, very talented Texas A&M team. They've got a lot of starters back. They've got a lot of experience. Got a lot of good players at key positions, whether it's quarterback, running back, lots of good defensive players. We've had some tough games with these guys in the past, and certainly need to elevate our game to maintain sort of the intensity and the standard of excellence that we want to play with for 60 minutes in a game. And I think everybody's got to challenge, themselves to do that.
Let's take a closer look at the series. And you know this if you follow Nick Saban. He's 19-0 against former Nick Saban assistants. That includes 3 wins against Jimbo Fisher. We'll have more on Nick Saban's dominance over his former assistants coming up in a little bit. Now, there have been 3 coaches in Alabama and A&M history who have coached at both schools. That's a high number. Of course, Paul Bryant, Gene Stallings, and Dennis Franchione. The Bear left Texas A&M with a 25-14-2 record in 4 seasons. With the win last week against Missouri, Alabama has now scored 30 or more points in 14 consecutive games. That beats out the previous record of 13 held by Texas A&M. The Tide looks to make that a 15-game streak this afternoon. Defensive lineman Christian Barmore appears to be feeling better, number 58, back at practice this week after he missed last week's opener against Mizzou with a knee injury. Barmore should be good to go for today's game against A&M. Last season, he recorded a sack against the Aggies in Alabama's win at Kyle Field. And with that, let's look at how the weather is going to shape up this afternoon. So far, so good. CTKO's Christopher Pipkin is live from the Walk of Champions. just outside the Walk of Champions, outside Bryant-Denny Stadium. With a look at our game day forecast, Christopher, it looks great right now. What's on tap?
Oh, it is just beautiful outside. I mean, the bright blue skies, there's really no clouds at all. If you are heading to the game, I would go ahead and advise at least bringing some sunblock because the sun is shining bright in the sky. And I'll go ahead and show you graphics here, though. What we're looking like in terms of temperature is just amazing. 67 degrees right now in Tuscaloosa, and a lot across the state. We're sitting in the 60s. Those are going to warm up into the 70s today as we start to look at your kickoff forecast. Looking at 75 degrees, we're going to hang on to these bright and sunny skies. I mean, look at the beautiful, at least, sun logos there just all across from halftime into the final. We're going to stick on to these 70s. So beautiful weather once again. I think it's actually a really good excuse if you can find a reason to put the TV outside and watch the game from outside because it's just the weather's just going to be so beautiful as we do head off into the rest of at least the afternoon to the evening time hours. But we'll go ahead and turn it back to you though, Gary. It looks pretty nice out here in terms of, you know, weather not going to have any problems today. A lot of people are just wearing shorts and their t-shirts, and it's just probably the best time to do it. So back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Christopher. It's gorgeous out there. I mean, this is football weather. It's October, and it feels like it's great. Well, coming up on CTKO, just how dominant has Coach Nick Saban been against his former assistants? We'll take a look at some of these amazing stats. And a new season brings some very new game day policies. We'll find out how students are adapting to the new safety restrictions. Plus, more on Crimson Tide linebacker Christian Harris and the teammate that helped fuel his fast start. Stick around. Crimson Tide Kickoff. We'll be right back.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, Bryant-Denny Stadium will be filled to only 20% of capacity this afternoon. One of the groups that's getting squeezed out in the numbers game are some of the students. Here's the breakdown. Seniors will receive 40% of the student ticket allotment. Juniors will receive 20%. Sophomores and freshmen will get 15%. And graduate students will receive 10%. CTKO's Matthew Travis talked to students not about whether they would watch, but how some of them will spend game day outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium.
That's right, Gary. I went out and talked to students before the season opener against Missouri last weekend, and they faced quite a dilemma. How do you approach Alabama home games this season?
So for this year, I am not completely certain about what my plans are. I know that for Georgia and Auburn, if I can get a ticket for those games, to understand that the ticket sales this year are going to be a little bit different. So if I can get a ticket to Georgia and Auburn, I will 100% try to get a ticket for those games. The other games, our other home games, I don't think I'll be trying to get a ticket this year.
Honestly, I think it's going to be hard to go to a group of friends to football games. I just kind of want to sit with everyone, so I probably won't.
Being a freshman this year, kind of like coming into it, you know, not really knowing how this year's going to work, but with COVID and everything going on, I'm just going to try and have, you know, the most fun I can.
Because of restrictions, even when Alabama is at Bryant-Denny Stadium, fans realize they might not be able to be.
So we're just going to have people over at the house. We'll have a couple TVs set up. We're going to be watching football all day, but for the Alabama football games in general, we're going to be in the living room. Everyone's together cheering on the Tide.
It's not just changes to the Bryant-Denny Stadium atmosphere. Tailgating will not be allowed on campus this year, which creates another question. Where am I going to watch a game this year?
I mean, I hope they'll be just as fun, you know, still having to follow all the regulations and everything, but I hope to try to kind of make the best of my freshman year.
So if it was like a 12 a.m. kickoff, I'd probably be at the quad tailgating with some friends, and then we'd all go to the stadium, but this year it's definitely going to be a lot different.
All the students I spoke with plan to attend football games this fall, but that creates yet another dilemma. Students are allowed to opt into only 2 of the 5 home games this season, so which 2? Reporting for Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm Matthew Travis. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Interesting. One storyline from last week that carries over into this week's game is getting that Crimson Tide defense to play for 60 minutes. Our William Galloway is live outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium with more on this and with more on the defensive player that showed he's ready for that all-around opportunity. William?
Hey, Gary. Well, we all know the Alabama defense struggled down the stretch last year, and one guy that had to step up as a freshman was Christian Harris. A big point of emphasis for the defense going into last week's game was playing as a unit against the Tigers. Harris, Dylan Moses, and Will Anderson combined for 17 tackles and 1.5 sacks. As competitors, they want to get those numbers up every week and play a more complete 60-minute game. Harris says his confidence as a player has grown since last season, and part of that is due to the simple presence of Dylan Moses.
I do feel a lot more confident out there on the field now than I did last year. I think a lot of that has to do with, the playbook. I feel a lot more comfortable playing now. Having Dylan Moses next to me, it kind of gives everybody on the defense a little bit of confidence. And, because, he makes all the calls for me. I just got to go out there and play football like I've been doing since I was 5. So, it makes things a lot easier for me. And, like I said, I feel a lot more confident. I can play fast and just show people what I can really do.
Well, the task for the Alabama defense today is to contain the Aggie offense led by Kellen Mond. Kickoff is set for 2:30 right behind me here at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Reporting live outside now for CTKO, I'm William Galloway. Gary?
All right, William, we appreciate it. Coach Saban could run his all-time record to 20-0 versus former assistant coaches that now have head coaching jobs. Besides Jimbo Fisher, the list includes Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin, Georgia's Kirby Smart, and Tennessee head coach Jeremy Pruitt. It just so happens that it's a list of Alabama's next 4 opponents. How about that? So they're going to get their cracks at Saban. Today is the first of 4 consecutive games, as I said, for Coach Saban against a former assistant. Jimbo Fisher was Saban's assistant at LSU for 6 years. Saban's 3-0 head-to-head against Jimbo, with all 3 meetings coming in the last 3 years, 2 at A&M, 1 at Florida State. In 2017, Alabama defeated the Seminoles in the season opener in Fisher's final season in Tallahassee. 2018, the Tide won in Tuscaloosa. 2019, another win at Kyle Field. In all, Coach Saban, as I said, 19-0 when coaching against his former assistant coaches. That is remarkable. Well, still to come on Crimson Tide Kickoff, we go around the SEC, including which team is under the most pressure to win in Week 2. Plus, in golf, creating space to play feels like a natural part of the game. Find out if that helped create any added normalcy to the Tide's golf preparation this offseason, and more on Alabama and A&M. We've got the game covered for you in just about every way, and Mississippi State doing some damage down in Baton Rouge last week. That's part of our SEC segment. Stay tuned. CTKO will be back right after this.
Coach Bryant, really loved and related to the underdog. Players that were not quite as big or as strong as others, but really loved the game of football. We gave you 110%. And here again, 110% was not rhetoric. He really meant that. He seemed to intuitively know we can all do a little bit more than we think we can do. You could have maybe Johnny Musso or Dwight Stevens, somebody get hurt, and Coach Bryant, okay, well, he'd be okay. But I remember this little walk-on, I don't remember his name, got hurt at practice one day. Coach Bryant came down out of his towel, which he very seldom did, and went over, and I never forget patting that boy on the head. That was just a poignant moment to me. He really related to what he called them in-betweeners. They wasn't great here. They wasn't fast. They wasn't big, but they were in-betweeners. They'd give you that 110%.
Eddie Conyers, he's a treasure. No doubt about that. Great stories. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. The Alabama women's golf program under Mick Potter has won 1 national championship, could have easily won a couple of more. It's one of the best golf programs in the country. Each week on CTKO, we are taking an opportunity to speak with other coaches around campus. Today, Julia Westerman visiting with Alabama's terrific women's golf coach, Mick Potter.
The Alabama women's golf fall season is just around the corner, with competition eligible to begin October 1st. I'm here this morning with head coach Mick Potter. Thanks for joining us this morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Julia. Thanks for having me. No problem. This is going to be your 16th season with the team, and with the abrupt end to last season, what are you hoping to see from this year's group? Well, we have the same team back as we had last year with the addition of Michaela Merard from Huntsville. is an outstanding junior player in the state, and also in the spring we'll have Benedetta Moresco joining us as well. So we're going to be deeper, we should be stronger, and I really, you know, and at my heartstrings, our season ended so abruptly last year with some really disappointed girls, and I just want them to have the opportunity to get back out there.
So going off of that, the athletes weren't able to compete in the final 2 tournaments of the regular season last year, as well as the SEC championships and all the NCAA events. So last season's ending, is it influencing how you're focusing on this one?
Well, I think so. I think it has to, because we had a really good fall last year, and we you know, maybe an outside contender for the national championship and certainly for the SEC championship. It's going to be an all-SEC schedule for the most part this fall, and I mean, there's no better competition than there is in the SEC, so we have ample opportunity to prove ourselves.
So golfers may have had a different experience over quarantine for the most part than some other athletes, since they may have had opportunities to golf at certain points, albeit not with the team. So does this seem like the sport has been less affected by COVID-19, or do you think there's a bigger influence that not everyone may be able to see?
Well, you know, I think to the degree that golf is probably the safest sport there is, we're outside, we can socially distance ourselves from everybody, and the fact that there have been successful tournament after successful tournament at the professional level, at the high amateur level, and at the junior level indicates that it's a pretty safe sport now. You know, everybody's affected and things are different, and they have to be administered and the tournaments run differently than they ever have, but it can be done.
So looking at the team, graduate student Kenzie Wright and freshman Michaela Merard have both been named to the Annika Award watch list. So what does it mean to have 2 of your athletes on this list, and what do you hope they bring to this season?
Well, and rightly so. I mean, they're both highly decorated amateur golfers. The Annika Award watch list is a fluid situation, so we have other girls on our team that are certainly capable of jumping onto that list at any time as well.
Alabama will play in its first tournament of the fall season starting on Monday. So what are you looking forward to most in getting back to competing?
Well, I think the camaraderie and the traveling together is something that they didn't have even when they were competing in the summer on their own. We have a lot of girls, a team full of girls, that the team aspect is important to them, first of all. And second of all, you know, they're going to see their friends and their peers, and as coaches, Susan and I are going to see our friends and our peers for the first time. Mostly it's the competition, high-level competition on a very distinguished golf course where the last NCAA championship was played. So we're really looking forward to that.
Thanks for joining us this morning, Coach Potter. Alabama women's golf tees off at the Blessings Golf Invitational in Fayetteville, Arkansas on Monday. The men's team will be there as well. Keep up with the fall season opener right here on WVUA 23.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Coach Potter. He is a terrific coach. Before we dive back into Alabama's football game with Texas A&M, let's go around the rest of the SEC. There are 6 other games, obviously, every week. SEC versus SEC. Georgia and Auburn renew their Deep South's oldest rivalry. And USC transfer quarterback J.T. Daniel could get the call today behind center for the Dogs. He was inactive last week, and the 2 quarterbacks Georgia did play, well, Mathis, the starter, was really ineffective. Bennett came in the walk-on and led them to a win over Arkansas. The defending national champions got a rude awakening for 2020. LSU dropped its season opener to Mississippi State. This week, the Tigers will try to rebound against Vanderbilt. 2 games that are already underway right now. Florida hosting South Carolina, and Missouri is looking for its first win at Tennessee. Coming up just a little bit later, Ole Miss takes on Kentucky. One of those teams will pick up its first win of the season. Here is the lineup for tonight. Auburn and Georgia kick off at 6:30 p.m. along with Arkansas at Mississippi State and LSU at Vanderbilt. Still to come on Crimson Tide Kickoff, Coach Saban hopes his team picked up on a lesson that comes from outside the SEC. And there seems to be momentum building for Alabama's Najee Harris in the Heisman Trophy race. Does Najee himself believe he belongs in the discussion? Stick around. CTKO will be right back. The upset bug has already bitten a few teams this year. We told you about LSU's loss at home to Mississippi State. Here's another. Last week, Kansas State knocked off Oklahoma 38-35 in overtime. Coach Saban picked up on the key message of that game. Welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Coach Saban used Oklahoma's loss to K-State as an example of why the Crimson Tide needs to play strong in all 4 quarters. In last week's win at Mizzou, Alabama led handily at halftime 28-3, but the Tide was outscored in the second half 16-10.
You know, it's the worst thing you can do is, you know, play poorly and win. And we played poorly in the second half. And I don't think anybody's immune from that. I've told the players that, so I'm not talking about them behind their back. And it's really my responsibility. I came home and felt really bad that I must have done a really, really bad job, not in getting the players ready to play the game, but maintaining their intensity throughout the game.
Well, Alabama football and Najee Harris are doing some special things. And Najee had some training videos in the offseason that are impressive. So it shouldn't be a surprise that he carried a big load against Missouri. But what heights can Harris reach this season? Let's go live to Julia Westerman with that story. Julia?
Alabama football has a YouTube presence on the roster this season, and he also might be making a statement on why he should be in New York City in December. Najee Harris has been a big contender throughout his 4 years at Alabama, and now in his senior year, Heisman discussion is brewing. Harris posted an outstanding 2019 season last year with 1,224 yards and 13 touchdowns. He already has 3 touchdowns through 1 game this season. And over the summer, Harris started a YouTube channel entitled the first video, Najee Harris Trains for the Heisman, begging the question if he thinks it's possible.
Well, thank you for watching my YouTube series. I appreciate that. The Heisman thing, I mean, it was just something like a hobby, I guess, I could do during quarantine. I really wasn't really focused on it. You know, as a running back, it's hard to win a Heisman if we're being realistic here nowadays, especially with all these great quarterbacks. So, I mean, it was really just a hobby.
Harris's most recent YouTube video was posted just about 2 weeks ago to his channel, but we'll get to watch more about his road to the Heisman this afternoon. Live for CTKO just outside Bryant-Denny Stadium, Julia Westerman, back to you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Nick Saban was asked about players leading by example this week. He believes that players earn respect from their teammates by putting their bodies on the line to make plays, laying it all out. Saban sees Mac Jones and Jalen Waddle as leaders because they have a willingness, as you can see right there, to sacrifice their bodies and take those hits for their team.
Anybody that's a competitor has, you know, a special appreciation for, you know, guys making great plays, and sometimes great plays come out of toughness, not just, you know, fantastic ability. So I think those two guys, you know, represented what we're trying to teach in terms of intangibles, you know, the kind of toughness, the kind of effort, the kind of focus that you have to sustain your intensity for 60 minutes in the game.
Waddle finished with 8 catches for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Tigers. I think he's a Heisman candidate. This year, he's expected to concentrate on being a playmaker, primarily on offense, rather than the all-around weapon that we're used to seeing. Texas A&M knows about that. In last season's game, Waddle had a touchdown catch and nearly broke 2 separate punt returns for scores. Alabama had 2 receivers picked in the first round of the NFL draft, Henry Ruggs III and Jerry Jeudy. But A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher says there isn't any drop-off for the Tide at that position.
Receivers, they got first-round guys. I mean, they had them 2 last year, and these 2 they got right there, probably 2, and the young guy coming on, I mean, he looks like a very good one, too. So, I mean, when you got first-round guys, you're always worried about no matter how many first-round guys you got. So they have players, the tight ends, the backs to catch it. So, yeah, I mean, we feel confident going in with our guys, but at the same time, we understand now you can't blink, you can't take a thing, because those guys are running away from you, catch it, they can catch it and run, they can go deep.
Indeed they can. Coming up, we go behind enemy lines with Texas A&M play-by-play broadcaster Andrew Monaco. Does he believe the Aggies' Week 1 struggles was a case of them looking ahead to the game against Alabama? And also this week's Burn Point. So you keep it tuned in to CTKO. Welcome into another edition of the Byrne Point. I'm Gary Harris, joined by the Director of Athletics at the University of Alabama, Greg Byrne, and we are excited because college football is back in the Southeastern Conference, and Alabama is getting set for its first home game of the 2020 campaign against the Texas A&M Aggies. Just to get to this point has taken a lot of work, and obviously special stipulations, Greg, are in place for this first home football game of 2020. Let's just start with on the first on the list, and that's the mobile ticketing and parking for this particular home game and the rest of the home games this season.
Yeah, as an industry in college athletics, college sports, college football, a lot of the larger programs have been moving to mobile ticketing and parking. This was pre-COVID. We were starting to explore it, and obviously we're looking for opportunities to reduce touch points. And so the timing of this was good, and so we've asked our fans to help us through this and adjust to a new normal, which is the mobile ticketing. We're certainly going to make sure we try to accommodate anybody if they don't have a smartphone or something like that. But it's another step for our program that will be helpful in the COVID environment. And I know our ticket office, our Tide Pride, our Crimson Tide Foundation, they've done a really good job of trying to help our donors and season ticket holders and educate them and learn that. And I'm trying to learn myself how all this works.
Yeah, it's going to be limited attendance, obviously, at the games. Something else, though, I've heard people say, well, I'll come on down to Tuscaloosa and I'll tailgate. But we want to make sure we're clear that there's no tailgating allowed on the University of Alabama campus this year for obvious reasons.
Yeah, with everything going on, we're trying to minimize large groups as much as we can. Obviously, we're going to have people in the stadium only at 20% capacity. And so part of that is saying, hey, we don't need to gather outside the stadium either. And to be honest, we want people to obviously be respectful wherever they're watching the games and do it with the people that they're around on a daily basis. But anything we can do to avoid large gatherings right now is a good thing. It's good for our health. And so, we're obviously really excited to play. We want everybody to watch us. We want everybody to have the time to have some camaraderie during that. But at the same time, too, we got to make sure that we're making good decisions so we can keep playing, keep moving forward. I get asked a lot, would we increase attendance as things progress, if things are trending in the right way? Unfortunately, that's, we are following the guidelines set for us by the state of Alabama, and we're very respectful of those guidelines. But the best chance to have an opportunity to add people to the crowd as the season goes on is to have the COVID numbers trend in a very positive way. So hopefully everybody can be a part of helping with that. And I think as a state, we've seen the numbers improve in a positive way lately, and let's hopefully see that continue.
And for the fans that are in attendance for these 5 home games this year, you'll need your personal protective equipment. In other words, you'll need to wear a mask. That'll be required, correct?
It will be. In fact, it's a little different than this one, but this is the same mask, just a different color, that we sent out to all of our season ticket holders as a thank you. They each got 2 of them. And we have tried to embrace that here at Alabama Athletics. I know it gets a little bit, there's debate about it, but there's a lot of statistics that show that it just reduces the ambers that come out and reduces the spread of COVID. So in order to have the games, we all need to do our part. And that includes wearing a mask. And it's kind of got an old hat for me. I've got one with me all the time. And Regina, my wife, has said I've never looked better when I have it on. So probably there's a few other people who could use the help with it as well. So let's do all we can to make sure we're using the masks, we're washing our hands, we're doing the social distancing within the stadium, and that gives us an opportunity to play. And each and every one of us can help in that process, and we really appreciate everybody's support.
And the fans and students that are attending the games will be required to do a COVID-19 related self-assessment prior to entry. So the folks there at the gates can make sure that they're cleared to go in, and there have been no issues.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're having any symptoms at all, we ask that you give your ticket to somebody that isn't showing any symptoms. And obviously, anything we can do to not have any spread involving any of our events, and we think with 20% outdoor game, we think that we're managing it in a very responsible way. But again, each of us have the responsibility to, there's any symptoms whatsoever, that you sit at home and watch it on TV.
And some other changes that we want to run through. There will be no cooling fans or water monsters this year. You can bring in a sealed bottle of water that fits into a clear bag. Chair backs will be installed in the bleachers to assist with the social distancing, easier to find your seats, and you can plug rolltide.com in to see all of the new changes for 2020. So you're trying to make it as simple and easy for the fans as you can.
Yeah, our marketing team, our communications teams, both here in athletics and the campus, have done a really nice job of getting information out there so everybody understands what we're asking each and every person to do. But those are necessary steps for this year. I think the chair backs, I think people will enjoy those, having the extra leg room and having the defined seats. Unfortunately, that probably won't be a long-term thing that we want to do, or actually fortunately, because we know everybody wants to get back in the stadium. But we thought that was a necessary and good step to take this year, to have everybody understand what we need to do to have the environment be as safe as possible.
Indeed, and we are having football, and that's the bottom line. And the folks that attend the games, I know this isn't the circumstances that we wanted for the newly renovated Bryant-Denny Stadium, but it's something special. Next week on the Byrne Point, Greg is going to talk about all the renovations through the Crimson Standard project that Bryant-Denny Stadium has undergone for the 2020 season and beyond. We'll talk about that next week. For Greg Byrne, I'm Gary Harris. This has been the Byrne Point. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff inside our WVUA 23 digital media studio in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I'm Gary Harris. The Crimson Tide takes on the Texas A&M Aggies this afternoon. Kickoff shortly after 2:30 on CBS. For more on the Tide's opponent this week, let's go behind enemy lines. WVUA's William Galloway spoke with A&M play-by-play broadcaster Andrew Monaco.
Hey, Gary, had a great conversation earlier this week with Andrew, and Texas A&M only beat Vanderbilt by 5 points last week. So when I asked Andrew if there was any oversight in that game to look ahead to this week against Alabama, he said no.
This comes down to SEC talent is SEC talent. Best teams, worst teams, you still got guys who can compete in the SEC.
Going from playing Vanderbilt in Week 1 to Alabama in Week 2 is quite the jump. But Monaco says the Aggies need to lean on their defense and experience in this game.
I think another one of the strengths becomes the linebacking core. Last year, we kind of held our breath what was going to happen if one of the linebackers were to get injured. But the depth, and that really is for what Jimbo Fisher has brought in 3 recruiting classes, has added to that depth. But you make an interesting point. Last year, the Aggies had 6 seniors total on their roster, and that was including walk-ons. That number now of juniors and seniors is 28. So I think that experience helps you navigate a 10-game SEC-only schedule.
In terms of X's and O's, it takes a lot to stop this dynamic Alabama offense. But for Texas A&M, what they have to do is simple.
Tackle. And I'm not trying to be funny here. Tackle, the initial hit, because Alabama will kill you with yards after contact. So good at that. They can throw the ball downfield as well. But if you don't make that initial hit, that 4 or 5 yard gain becomes 15 or 20.
Offensively for the Aggies, it starts with Kellen Mond. Monaco feels that his experience against Alabama will help him.
The understanding that Kellen's never shrunk in a big moment. So he has played in that stadium once. He has played Alabama 3 times. So I don't think the moment is ever too big for him. I think that's what the senior leadership does.
Monaco says there's one key for Texas A&M in this game.
I'm going to go to Jimbo Fisher's guys with the hands in the dirt. I really think the linemen set the tone. If the offensive line can give Kellen time and open up holes, success for Texas A&M.
Now, Alabama has 7 straight wins over the Aggies in this series, looking for number 8 today. Live in the newsroom for CTKO, William Galloway. Gary, back to you.
All right, William, that's good stuff. I love going behind enemy lines. It just really gives you insight into the opponent. And thanks to Andrew Monaco for giving us that look at Texas A&M. The Aggies, though, let's just be honest, they didn't look sharp in that 17-12 win over Vanderbilt. A&M won the game despite losing 3 fumbles, and they gave up a safety and failing to convert a 4th down. The defensive struggles were noticeable, too, as Vanderbilt had some success against that Aggie experienced defense. Let's hear from some A&M players, though, on putting the heat on Mac Jones. Getting after the quarterback will be a priority for them this afternoon.
The key to getting pressure is putting pressure on them. Continue to rush with intensity, rush with purpose, and making them uncomfortable back there. You know, some people like to sit back there and pat the ball. We don't want that. We want guys uncomfortable.
Will that help you on Saturday when you go in and that stadium's not packed with Alabama fans?
Of course, a place like Bama with a lot of fans. It reminds me of Texas A&M, but it's not better than Texas A&M, of course. But not that many fans. It's going to be a blessing for us.
He caught himself there. You can't say it's better than your own stadium. So good for him. Still to come, the Dean of the College of Community Health sits down with us and gives us an update on the campus fight against COVID-19. And we'll give you an inside look at the improvements at Bryant-Denny Stadium. You have to see them to believe them, and we'll show you. Coming up next on CTKO.
Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Lynn Brooks, and so glad that you are with us this morning. Well, this is the University of Alabama's very first home football game since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we thought that this is a good opportunity to get some expert advice for all of you football fans out there. We've got Dr. Richard Friend. He's the Dean of the College of Community Health Sciences and pretty much considered the expert from campus. So we're glad you could take some time to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, a lot of people are coming to campus here for the very first time in a long time because we have a lot of visitors that come to town specifically for football. So for folks who haven't been able to keep tabs on what's happening here at the Capstone, where is the campus in terms of COVID-19?
Sure. I think the campus is in a really good place. Of course, there have been a lot of unknowns along the way, but we've had a very aggressive testing platform, and our numbers are excellent right now, and it's a great time to have a home football game.
What do you attribute to the improvement?
Well, I think early on, as everybody knows, we did see a spike that was very concerning. We tested very aggressively. We did a lot of contact tracing, a lot of isolation quarantine. We worked with our city partners and our campus partners to really enforce some regulations that we knew would help, and they have.
For people who are just arriving on campus today, they're going to see some changes. A ban on tailgating, for example, at traditional tailgating, we should say, among other things. How important do you think it is to maintain these same standards as we hit football season?
Sure. I think it's very important. We've, at College of Community Health Sciences, we've never stopped. We've been seeing patients since spring break. We really haven't slowed down. And what we've found in our own buildings is that as long as people follow the precautions, the social distancing and the masking when it's needed, which is really within 6 foot of anybody, that we haven't seen infections. And I think that's really important. I think the tendency for folks when they come back is going to be they're going to be so excited that football's reoccurring that they may get complacent, and we don't want that to happen.
So the message here is don't let your guard down. By the way, we have a little rule of thumb. If you can hold your arm out and you don't touch fingertips, that's roughly about 6 feet. So
that's right.
A little tidbit, a little tip for you as you're traveling around campus today. So I'm noticing that one thing that's not happening as people enter the gates, they're not doing temperature checks, which is something that we're accustomed to in the COVID era. So why no temperature checks?
Well, of course, we're developing science as we go. And 6 months ago, we noted that severe cases of COVID had fever. And so we were doing temperature checks, and we thought that was a way to help us figure out who had COVID and who didn't. But as time's gone on, there's been some studies done, and we know only about 50% of patients that are admitted to the hospital with COVID have fever. So it's really not a very good screening tool, but it's something that we can do quickly and efficiently to make sure anybody who does have a fever may not come in.
And the University of Alabama is asking for people to self-screen, if you will. So if I'm self-screening before I come to the football game, what am I looking for?
Well, I think it's really important to really critically evaluate how you're feeling. If you're feeling really sluggish, tired, if you have any body aches, if you have a runny nose, a cough, a sore throat, nausea, vomiting, you know, there's a list of about 13 symptoms, then you really shouldn't come to the game. And I think where people get a little bit confused is when they have allergies and they convince themselves that they always have these symptoms, and then we test them and indeed it's COVID. So I think we have to have a very high level of scrutiny on ourselves to make sure that we're not putting others at risk.
This is normally a very family-friendly event. Should people with kids, for example, be concerned? Do you feel like this is safe for the family?
Well, the reality is that families are usually always together. And so I think we've really made best efforts to keep families together at the stadium, but we want to make sure that those cohorts stay 6 feet apart from each other. And we also know that any event that's outside, because of the wavelength of the sun, the UV light, that the risk of COVID is much less. But there is still a risk, and I think everybody needs to be very careful.
Great information for us, Dr. Richard Friend. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And stick around, more Crimson Tide Kickoff to come.
Guys, it's Mackenzie Williams with WVUA 23 Sports, and today I'm taking you guys with me as we tour the new and improved Bryant-Denny Stadium. Mask up, let's go. Guys, so we just came in through the north entrance through the tunnel where we watched this insane hype video, and the tunnel leads into the locker room. It's awesome. I mean, how many chairs do you think are in that room?
1,000.
So many chairs. We're now up here in the press box, and the view is static. I mean, it's so beautiful. So to recap it all, we went in through the tunnel next to the Walk of Champions, which led into the locker room. Next, we went upstairs and saw the recruiting room. And to top it all up, we saw the press box, which was absolutely insane. I know you guys are all so excited. Mackenzie Williams with WVUA 23 Sports.
Thank you, Mackenzie. That was awesome, man. I love taking that tour that you provided. All right, let's get a final check of our forecast. Christopher Pipkin is outside Bryant-Denny Stadium with that.
Yes, and it is absolutely beautiful out here, Gary. I mean, I really don't think I can remember a day that feels so amazing out here. We'll go ahead and take a graphics, though, real fast. You can see we're actually sitting at 71 degrees right now here in Tuscaloosa. A lot across the state, we're sitting in the upper 60s and lower 70s, really making it for just a beautiful day. Feels amazing outside. Here is your Crimson Tide kickoff forecast. 75 degrees is what we're expecting, keeping on to these sunny conditions all throughout the day. Not even a cloud in the sky right now. And this is really the story across much of the SEC, the Southeast. Everyone is getting in on these beautiful temperatures. Of course, Florida actually has maybe a few clouds they're dealing with down here in the Southeast. But for most of us here in Alabama, we're really nice. So, Gary, I mean, I think it's just a great day to go out and enjoy the nice weather.
Indeed it is. Thank you, Christopher. That's going to do it for Crimson Tide Kickoff. A reminder to catch William Galloway with a recap of Bama and Texas A&M tonight on the news at 10. For everybody here at CTKO and WVUA 23, I'm Gary Harris. Enjoy the game and have a great afternoon.